After being completely blindsided by Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones, we finally get the ninth entry in the series. Fire Emblem The Path of Radiance was released on the Nintendo GameCube in 2005, the first console release since 1999. Being Nintendo's first disc-based system, everything needed to be bigger and better than the GBA games. It would have a high-quality soundtrack and full-motion videos with voice acting. And most important of all, Fire Emblem makes the jump to 3D polygons. But let's face it, being in 3D really doesn't make that much of a difference to Fire Emblem compared to other traditional 2D franchises. With 3D, you can now rotate the map and also zoom in and out, and yeah, that's about it. While being in 3D doesn't alter the gameplay drastically, it also means it was able to transition seamlessly into 3D where some franchises still struggle during that generation. There was a lot of hype and speculation in the Fire Emblem community as information trickled in. There was also some animosity as well from longtime Fire Emblem fans. First of all, the early screenshots didn't look very good. This is partly due to the game still being in development. While they looked rough, it later spiraled into weird rumors of the early screenshots being from the cancelled Fire Emblem 64. We know this isn't true since Fire Emblem 64 became Fire Emblem Sword of Seals, now officially localized as the Binding Blade. Second of all, no matter how rough the early screenshots looked, they were still way beyond what the N64 was capable of. The amount of characters and objects on screen is greater than any N64 game. In a close-up shot of the combat, you can see the characters have detailed shadows, what appear to be individual fingers, clearly connected limbs that don't look like sausages, and cel-shaded outlines. I know N64 modders have overcome these limitations in 2024, but not in the late 90s and early 2000s. It's just a case of rose-tinted glasses. That's not to say this game is a technical marvel by any means, but those screenshots weren't from Fire Emblem 64. They actually passed off Fire Emblem 64 screenshots for a GBA game during the announcement of the Game Boy Advance. We didn't learn this until many years later. What's interesting is that judging from the early screenshots compared to the final product, it felt like they originally wanted a flat 2D cel-shaded look. But the final product comes off as unsure of whether it wants to be cel-shaded or simply have cartoony graphics. It's kind of an unsatisfying blend. I think going full cel-shading fits the anime aesthetic of Fire Emblem more. Just look at Tales of Symphonia. That's an anime RPG from the same era that embraced cel-shading and still holds up graphically. This is just my conspiracy theory, but I think the reaction to the Wind Waker's cel-shaded graphics was what gave Intelligent Systems cold feet. You can see the bold black outlines around the characters in the early screenshots, but they're barely noticeable in the final game. Again, it's just my little conspiracy theory. Nothing I said is factual. We do know the battle animations are motion captured and then touched up afterwards to make them look more exaggerated. The results are a mixed bag where you have a good variety of combat animations compared to the GBA games, but they look very stiff. If you turn off battle animations, you can still see a simple combat animation on the map similar to the SNES games. It is slower than units bumping, but it looks more visceral this way. The other point of contention was a new race of beastmen called the Lagoos. Some fans hated this addition. There was a lot of anger towards the cat race specifically. I asked the admin of the then popular Fire Emblem message board Terranigma Freak for his thoughts, and I quote, "I was worried the cat girls would give people the wrong idea about Fire Emblem. I always associated cat girls with weird perverts. The dragons still looked like people. The cat girls looked like someone's fetish and it didn't fit with the world of Fire Emblem." After the game came out, I warmed up to them because they were presented in a very dignified manner. End quote. While the outrage is silly in hindsight, even the developers weren't confident the Lagoos would fit in. Terranigma Freak's concern isn't entirely crazy either, as people have associated cat girls serving the same role as the Playboy Bunny in fetishizing youthful innocence. The Lagoos won people over due to strong characterization, but they ended up failing behind in other ways. We'll get back to this later. Nintendo was heavily pushing GBA to GameCube connectivity this generation, and Path of Radiance has some connectivity functions with all three GBA Fire Emblems. For folks outside of Japan, you can only connect 2 games. When connected, you'll get more trial maps and an art gallery. However, they removed the entire Binding Blade art gallery from the game. Heaven forbid those dirty westerners should lay eyes on characters for a game that Nintendo refused to localize. We lost and gained a difficulty mode during localization as well. The original Japanese version had a normal, hard, and maniac mode. The Maniac mode was removed for all other versions and was replaced with an easy mode. You get less experience, more enemies, stronger enemies, and different enemies in later stages of Maniac mode. Okay, in fairness, Maniac mode can get pretty tedious, and no one has been able to complete an Iron Man run as of early 2024. The localized version also gave a 15% boost to critical rates of Swordmasters, Berserkers, and Snipers. Some of the overworld and ending narration was also cut. With the 9th game in the series, Intelligent Systems decided to build on top of the previous games instead of making drastic changes to the gameplay. Instead of throwing everything out the window, they made changes to the existing foundation that can alter how you play. These are just a few quick examples. Characters no longer need to be next to each other to build support, making it less tedious. Your strength affects a weapon's weight instead of your build. Dark magic no longer exists, and the 3 elemental spells reverted back to the genealogy of the Holy War style triangle. Skills take up a character's capacity, and if a character has run out, you can't give them more skills. Let's not forget the amount of old and new skills added into the game. This is on top of all the usual changes like classes, stats, weapons, and many other tweaks to the existing systems. This makes the game feel familiar but also fresh at the same time. One of the biggest changes is the greatly expanded battle preparations. You still equip your characters, select who to bring to battle, or assign skills. On top of that, you can now distribute bonus experience, initiate support conversations, and new side conversation, or craft weapons. Weapon crafting is a completely new idea. You can craft a special weapon once per chapter. You pick the base weapon out of the pre-existing weapons in the game, and then you can tweak the stats to your liking provided you have enough money. You can even change the colors and name them. I love this feature so much because it's a great way to help level up weak characters on the battlefield. All your weapon shopping is done at the base too. According to the developers, shops were removed from the map intentionally so the player could focus on battles. Another favorite new feature of mine is the bonus experience. If you complete a difficult side task or beat the map under a certain number of turns, you get bonus experience. This adds extra challenge and reward to the players. The bonus experience can then be distributed among your characters when you're at your base. This replaces gambling at the arenas. This also prevents power leveling characters, but at the same time, it also makes low-level characters easier to level up. You can feed them the bonus experience that you accumulated in the safety of your base. It solves the old problem of leveling up weaker characters without abusing the arena and adds extra depth to the maps. They came up with some interesting new side objectives to let you earn bonus experience. For example, one of my favorite new mission objective is Stealth. It's a mission where you try to get through the map while avoiding all the enemies. You can completely ignore stealth and fight your way like normal, but if you want that sweet bonus experience, you'll be tackling this map like a puzzle. It's only one map, but it's very memorable. The trade-off is the removal of hidden side chapters now, but I think bonus experience is an excellent replacement. This game also introduced a new way to permanently highlight enemy movement on the map to help you plan your next move better. No need to re-click to double check how far an enemy can move. It's an excellent quality of life feature. It's great for someone like me who has the memory of a goldfish. Before this game, I would check an enemy's movement range, then check another enemy's, only to forget the range of the first enemy. It's harder to go back to the game without this feature. This is what I mean by making changes to the foundation of the game that can affect the gameplay drastically. The game also added something called fixed growth rates to increase replay value. It's a bit complicated, and I'd rather not turn this into a fixed growth rate tutorial. Just know that a character will grow based on their growth rate, weapon and item equipped, and the enemy they killed. If all of them add up to 100 or more, the character will gain 1 point when they level up. One of the weirder changes involved the removal of stats from battle scenes. This sounds like a minor thing because when it's your turn, you can see how you stack up before the fight begins. But when it's the enemy's turn and a new enemy attacks you, you don't know what to expect. It's not game-breaking, but it's a very subtle change in strategy that most players might not even notice. The game also tries to switch things up and encourage players to use more of their party with biorhythm. All biorhythm really does is increase or decrease a character's accuracy and dodge by 5%. A character's biorhythm moves up and down from chapter to chapter based on the sine wave pattern. It's easy to see when their biorhythm will be high, when it will be low, and where it'll go in the next chapter. It sounds cool on paper, but the impact on who you pick is minimal compared to say Fatigue in Thracia 776, since it's only a 5% difference. Shoving is another new mechanic that's simple and versatile. Have you ever run into a situation where you're one hit from killing an enemy, but you can't reach that enemy because it's blocked by your own units? Shove them away. Did you accidentally move a weaker unit into the enemy's range? Shove the unit away. You have a character you want in a very specific space and they're just one square off? Shove them forward one square. Though you can't just shove randomly. The unit doing the shoving has to be within 2 points of the unit's weight that you want to shove. That's why they added the weight stat separate from build. So about those Lagoos, they are basically dragons with some differences. To transform, you need to fill up a meter. You gain points at the beginning of each turn and also from dodging attacks. Once you transform, the meter slowly depletes and when it empties, they revert to their human form. You'll need to refill the meter to use them again. The Lagoos are useless in human form because they can't attack. If you bring multiple Lagoos to battle, you now have a bunch of characters that are useless for several turns. There are a few special Lagoos that can always remain in animal form, or have a skill that allows them to transform faster. There's also a special item they can equip that allows them to remain in animal form with slightly reduced stats. I understand the need to strike a balance in the gameplay because a transformed Lagoos is very powerful, but this is just clunky. The Lagoos are fearsome warriors and pride themselves on being able to fight without weapons in the story. Their in-game power doesn't match up with how they're depicted in the story. Speaking of story, Intelligent Systems delivered a pretty ambitious story for this game. The story takes place on the continent of Tellius and deals with racism and political drama, all with excellent world building. It's a continent inhabited by humans called the Bjorks and the beastmen called Lagoos. The Lagoos aren't just cats. There are also hawk, raven, heron, and dragon Lagoos, each with their own territory, history, and motivations. Tellius had a long, ugly history of racism and slavery. The Kingdom of Crimea was trying to improve the relationship between Bjorks and Lagoos, but this act provoked their neighbor, Dain, to invade. The king was killed during the invasion, while his brother, the heir to the throne, goes missing in battle. The late king's only daughter, Princess Alincia, flees the country to seek protection in the neighboring kingdom of Gallia. She is ambushed by Dain troops, but is saved by the Grail mercenaries. Under the protection of Ike and his band of mercenaries, they travel through the continent to reach the most powerful nation, the Benyan Empire, for reinforcements. Can the Empire be trusted after committing a massacre and driving the Heron Lagoos into extinction? What about the Tower of Guidance within Benyan where the goddess Ashura sleeps? What's her role in all of this? While all this is going on, we see Ike's journey and personal growth as he inherits his father's company after his unexpected passing and tries to live up to his name. For the first time in the history of the franchise, Ike isn't a noble. He is just an average guy living the life of a mercenary commoner. Ike is more blunt and has a simpler view of the world. He's the kind of guy who would eat an alpaca if given the chance. However, for some reason, Ike is missing a bit of his childhood memories and doesn't remember much about his late mother. Nevertheless, Ike works hard to earn respect from his father and fellow mercenaries while trying his best to protect his younger sister, Mist. I can list other qualities that make Ike likable, but I want to highlight one very simple conversation that elevates Ike above all others. This is how you deal with saying something racist or other bigoted things out of ignorance. Ike didn't double down or use his ignorance as an excuse. He apologized and asked to be educated and never said it again. Learn from Ike. It's not just Ike who gets the good lines. The cast of Path of Radiance is one of the most lovable casts, all with their own backstories and standout moments thanks to some excellent dialogue. One especially scathing commentary on humanity's willingness to turn a blind eye to others' suffering hits hard. On the opposite side is the Mad King Ashnar. He has no tragic backstory. He murdered his way to the throne. He abandoned his own son because he had no special powers. He believes strength is all that matters and will hire anyone that proves themselves capable. He started the war hoping to engulf the entire continent and create enough negative energy to awaken a dark god and remake the world. A world where a person's destiny isn't shackled by their birth. He's a refreshing villain without any sympathy. Stories try to give a reasoning for people to be bad, but as we see in real life, some people are just awful by nature. So having an unhinged villain makes Ashnar stand out. His ultimate goal of wanting a world where anyone with talent and ability can stand out is something we can empathize with. I think a lot of people would agree this is very relevant to our lives, but achieving those goals by killing thousands of people and doing sick experiments to another race, that's where you draw the line. Although Ashnar is billed as the main villain, Path of Radiance has another villain that hits harder and feels more personal. He's the Black Knight. The Black Knight is one of Dane's 4 riders. This was once a title held by Grail, the most revered swordsman on the continent. The Black Knight was his former student. He was devastated when Grail suddenly took his family and left Dane, denying him a glorious final battle to see if he had surpassed his mentor. Now, under the employ of Ashnar, he seeks an artifact guarded by Ike's sister Mist. He's also a terrifying opponent in the game. He's extremely powerful and will chase you in a few chapters. Late in the game, Ike has a chance to take on the Black Knight one-on-one in an optional battle. Will Ike honor his father's dying wish to not seek revenge against him? This is entirely up to the player. Whatever your choice may be, we don't learn much about the Black Knight other than to fear him. What about the Fire Emblem and its role in the story? In this game, it's a medallion. Sealed away inside the medallion is an evil goddess, Yune, who almost destroyed the world. It was the goddess of order, Ashura, who summoned heroes to defeat Yune and seal her away in a medallion. The medallion feeds on the negative energies of the world, and if enough energy is caused by a war, she would awaken. Even though she's sealed away, the chaotic energy from the medallion will corrupt most people, driving them insane. Only people with the purest of hearts can touch the medallion without going crazy. This is why Ashnar wanted the medallion. He wants to release the goddess so he can remake the world. Grail once touched this medallion and was driven mad, killing everyone in sight. On the other hand, Mist can touch the medallion without going mad due to her pure heart. She became the guardian of the medallion and would hum a tune her mother taught her whenever the medallion began to glow to calm the goddess trapped inside. This is the medallion that Ashnar sent the Black Knight to retrieve. Intelligent Systems hired Digital Frontier to produce cutscenes with voice acting for the game to go with the story. The game has around 10 minutes of cutscenes sprinkled throughout. The cutscenes are animated with the 2D and CG hybrid style. A lot of the art mimics 2D art, but there's this extra glossy sheen on it that also makes it look more round and CG. Certain objects like metal armor are rendered more realistically. Maybe it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I like it. They released a Blu-ray with the cutscenes in HD a few years ago, but for some reason, the cutscenes from Path of Radiance didn't get that treatment, so this is the only game with its cutscenes still stuck in 480p. The English voice acting to go with those cutscenes is a mixed bag, unfortunately. There's some good, some bad, and some in the middle. I get the feeling the lackluster performances and weird oddities fall on the shoulders of the voice director and not the actors. At least all the characters' voices seem to fit how they look. In the early days of anime dubbing, you could have voices that didn't match the character. This isn't a problem for the Black Knight since we don't even know what he looks like. Instead, the Black Knight's voice is overly distorted by a tin can filter, making it hard for most people to understand what he's saying in English. This filter isn't as bad in the Japanese original. Speaking of the Black Knight, his identity remains a mystery no matter what happens. There are also other unanswered questions, such as where is Alencia's uncle? Who is the person that Soph was searching for? I don't know if I would call it sequel bait, but this is one of the few games in the series that left some questions unanswered. We've been at this long enough. You know the next game will continue the story. Join us next time when Fire Emblem makes its way to Nintendo's next and most controversial console in Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn.